Alright, hello ladies and gents, welcome back. Today, ArenaNet released a studio update for April of 2022. And I thought, some people, they like to have the news updates read to them, or maybe they didn't see it. And I thought we could go through it quickly and just see what ANet has to say. This is a rather lengthy one, as they have quite a few plans up their sleeves. But let's get into it. So they start with, "Greetings Tyrion. As promised in last month's Future of Guild Wars 2 blog post, we're back with another helping of the latest happenings here at ArenaNet Studio. In this edition, we'll be touching on Guild Wars 2 End of Dragons meta events and rewards, Directx 11, World vs. World, and our ongoing new player improvement testing." First, they start with final encounter of the Jade C meta event. From the outset, we designed the final boss of the Guild Wars 2 End of Dragons Jade C meta event to be more challenging than most of our existing open world experiences. It's the epic finale of a story arc told over the course of 10 years after all. Over the past month, we've been making incremental balance adjustments to the meta event's final boss, with the goal of making it more accessible while still retaining an increased difficulty level. Between the mechanical changes we've implemented and the community's willingness to rise to the challenge, we've seen the number of successful clears increase dramatically in recent weeks. For context, in the first few weeks of March, only about 15% of boss attempts ended successfully. Most recently, that number has risen to over 60%, putting it closer to existing world bosses and meta event success rates while still being more challenging than any of them. In terms of balance, the fight is very close to where we'd like it to be. However, we'll continue to monitor community feedback and completion rates and, as always, make adjustments as needed. Next week's release will also address a bug that causes the final boss to enter the bite phase more frequently than intended. Next, they go on to talk about the End of Dragons meta event reward. In the weeks following the release of Guild Wars 2 End of Dragons, we heard you loud and clear that the rewards for the new meta events needed a little more oomph. Specifically, when you consider the difficulty and the time required to complete the events. In other words, there needs to be a stronger incentive to replay the content after the initial playthrough. Since then, we've removed a significant number of junk items from the loot table, so you're more likely to get higher value items, increased the value of the reward chest contents, and added a Hero's Choice chest for successfully completing these events. And while these are good improvements, we recognize that a stronger incentive is needed if we want these events to be a long-term addition to the endgame open world experience. This is especially true for Dragon's End, which contains our most challenging meta event to date. To help address this, in next week's update we'll be adding a new Void-themed infusion as a rare drop to the Bounty of Dragon's End loot table. The Bounty of Dragon's End can be earned daily for successfully completing the meta event, and up to 5 additional chests can be purchased each week from the vendor Myung-hee, located in Xingje Monastery in Seitung Province. Directx 11 update. In the July 2021 studio update, we announced that we'd upgrading our graphics API from DirectX 9 to DirectX 11 as part of our long-term support plans for Guild Wars 2. This upgrade is the required first step in unlocking client performance improvements and graphical upgrades made by DX11. James Fulop, a senior engine programmer on Guild Wars 2, posted a blog last year that covers the technical details of the upgrade. In September of last year, we introduced DX11 as opt-in beta, and since then the team has been hammering away at bugs and crashes related to the upgrade. Today the feature is stable enough to move to the next phase. With the May 10th release, we'll enable DX11 by default for all newly created accounts. This means that all future players joining the game, whether it's from our official site or eventually from Steam, will benefit from DX11 from their very first login. We'll also remove the beta tag from the feature in the settings menu. As a note, existing players who are not participating in the DX11 beta will not be automatically opted in on May 10th, but if you'd like to start using DX11, you can enable it from the graphics settings menu. We didn't expect DX11 to deliver substantial performance improvements all on its own, but we're seeing plenty of reports that indicate it's a nice bump to frame rates for many, so we encourage you to start using it. In the long run, we plan to deprecate DX9 support and move to making DX11 default graphics setting for all players, new and veteran alike. This will open the door for future improvement. World vs. World restructuring. In our last studio update, we mentioned that we're actively investigating the queue bug that causes players to get thrown to the back of the Worldview World queue after waiting in line on reset night. It's frustrating to experience, and with the deep queues that happen during World Restructuring beta events, it usually means that impacted players log off for the night rather than wait in line again. Unfortunately, this issue isn't something we've been able to reproduce in our dev environment. To help diagnose the issue, in the April 19th update, we're adding new data logging to the game that will allow us to collect the information needed to identify the root cause. In the meantime, the team has shifted their attention to designing the user experience surrounding alliances, a sub-feature of World Restructuring that allows multiple guilds to matchmake together. We're also in the early phase of designing our next batch of rewards improvements for the mode. We'll have more details on this in a future blog. Edge of the Mist instancing bug. Attention all enjoyers of player-organized GVG, Guild v Guild, gameplay. There's a fix for the Edge of the Mist instancing issue coming with next week's release. You'll be back to pin sniping and dodging in unison in no time. Jade Bot Scavenging. In the March 29th update, we made a change to Jade Bot Scavenger protocols that makes them no longer grant materials or trophies for player kills. This change was intended to address an exploit elsewhere in the game, but Worldview World players took splash damage in the process and were unfairly nerfed. We'll revert this change for Worldview World in the April 19th update. Happy scavenging. March 29th balance update follow-up. We made some significant changes to Worldview World profession balance in the March 29th update, and for the most part we like what we're seeing. However, there are a few lingering issues that we don't want to wait until June's profession update to address. We're still monitoring and formulating our plan on this front, so we're not ready to share details quite yet, but we wanted to let you know to expect some additional Worldview World specific balance adjustments in the May 10th release. New player improvements testing. As we mentioned in last month's studio update, we're taking steps to ensure a smooth launch on Steam later this year. This launch is an important piece of our long-term plans for growing the community, so we want to get it right. To prepare for this, we'll experiment with some changes to the new player experience with the goal of improving new player retention. To be clear, we're not undertaking huge overhauls at this stage, but rather focusing on smaller changes that can have a big impact on the player experience. We tried the overhaul approach back in 2014 with mixed results. In fact, some of our experiments this year will explore reversing some of those 2014 changes. Typically, these tests will only impact small segments of new accounts for a limited duration. This is referred to as A/B testing. We'll deploy the changes to a small number of new players, study the results, and then decide whether to make the change permanent, further iterate on it, or remove it from the game. It's worth noting that we expect some of our tests, or variations of a test, to not work out. That's the nature of an experiment. When we've had a successful test, we'll roll the change out officially and communicate those changes in our release notes. Most of the players reading this won't be impacted by these experiments, however, some new players might take notice, so we wanted to give you a heads up to make sure you're in the know in case you see some curious comments. Studio break. In last month's update, we stated that the health and well-being of our employees is a top priority for the studio. As exhilarating and fulfilling as it is to ship an expansion, it can also be stressful at times and comes at the tail end of 2 years of fast-paced development. And since then, the team has been working diligently to address bugs and feedback from the Guild Wars 2 End of Dragons launch. It's time for a breather. The studio is taking this week off to recharge our batteries before we get fully ramped up on our new projects and initiatives. In fact, many of us might be outside touching grass and enjoying the sunshine at this very moment. We'll be back to it on April 18th. End of transmission. That's all for this edition. If you haven't done so, please check out the Future of Guild Wars 2 blog post from last month. It contains a lot of juicy details from our long-term plans for Guild Wars 2, and includes a roadmap of what's to come over the next 3 months. Speaking of soon, don't forget to catch the first returning episode of Living World Season 1, Flame and Frost, next Tuesday. The April 19th release will also include the Aetherblade Hideout Strike Mission Challenge mode. As always, thank you for being a part of the Guild Wars community. We'll see you in the game. Josh, Amy, and the Guild Wars 2 team. So there you have it, the April update from ArenaNet and what they'll be working on, which includes new player improvements, balance updates, world restructuring for Worldview World, DX11 updates, End of Dragons meta event rewards, and overall just some balance adjustments for the Jade Sea meta event. So that will be it for today. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you next time. See ya!